organizers to invite me here to give a presentation and to come back to this wonderful city of Cairo. So thanks again. So I want to give you a little bit of more information about the influence of universal hearing screening on school performance of students with a hearing loss. And why do I want to focus on this is that the Dutch-speaking part of Belgium, which is called Flanders, already started with universal hearing screening in 1998, so which is now more than 20 years ago. Yeah? So we now really know what happened with these children, these first children which were screened 20 years ago. And in the meantime also, within the screening, between 1998 and 2016, more than 2 million of ears were screened. Yeah? And what came out of that screening is that 2.2 per thousand have a permanent hearing loss. Of that group, 84% have a bilateral symmetric hearing loss at birth. 22% have an asymmetric hearing loss at birth, and 30% have a unilateral hearing loss at birth. Now, very quickly, yeah, already also before the universal hearing screening, we had already reimbursement for cochlear implants in bilaterally deaf children and adults. In 2010, since 2010, we have reimbursements for bilateral implants in children. And very recently, in December, so 2 months ago, we have new selection criteria for cochlear implants, which brought down the average threshold from 85 dB to 70 dB, in combination, of course, with the results with your hearing aid, to reimburse maybe a cochlear implant. Now, what happened in these 20 years? When you look at this graph, it shows all the deaf children at the moment who go to school. Preschool, primary school, secondary school. And what we see is that within the population of deaf children in preschool, above 90% of these deaf children are wearing cochlear implants. Even of the young population, 75% have 2 cochlear implants. When we look at primary school, it's also above 90% who wear cochlear implants. And at secondary school, which means between 12 and 18, we see above 70% have cochlear implants. Of this group, we see now that in preschool, 44% is in a regular school, in primary school, 64%, and at secondary level, 70% is in a mainstreamed, in a regular school, which means that in our schools for the deaf, especially deaf children with additional needs are there. All the children who are only deaf are in regular schools. In Belgium, we also have the possibility that children who are in a regular school, that they can ask for extra interpreter. And the interpreter, it can be a sign language interpreter when they know sign language, or it can be a speech-to-text interpreter. Now, when I look at the population at secondary school, and I look what is do you ask for an interpreter or not? I see huge differences between the deaf children who are wearing cochlear implants and those who are not wearing cochlear implants. What I see in the group who is deaf and is not wearing cochlear implants, there's this group, the brown bar is the biggest, which means that the biggest part of that group is asking for an extra sign language interpreter. When I look at the group who is wearing cochlear implants, you see that the blue bar is the biggest, which means no interpreter needed. Most of them, they wear a microphone, yeah? And the teacher is wearing a microphone, yes, or the Bluetooth technology of today, but no extra support anymore. If they ask for extra support of an interpreter, for some of them it's a sign language interpreter, but also a lot of them ask for speech-to-text interpreter to have subtitling of the teacher. So huge change in less interpreted needs, which means, of course, for the government of education on the long term, saving money. Yeah? They need less support. Separate from that, some of them have also extra support from a teacher who is maybe visiting them once in a week or in 2 weeks' time. Now also, let's look at their performance. How are they functioning? What are they doing? And I did a comparison between the population of deaf children in Belgium in 1995 and in 2015. So in 1995, it's the green bar. What did we see? In the special schools for the deaf, 70% of our deaf children were studying vocational training, learning to become a bakery, a butcher, a painter, these things. Yeah? The group with additional needs was 14%, and they were also in special school. So it means in total, 84% was in the special schools. If 10% went to regular school, normal school, then also 10%, the biggest group, was just studying their vocational training. So studying there maybe electricity or a butcher or whatever, but in a regular school. Only in total, in these two groups, 6% of our deaf children were at secondary school at a level which were preparing them for high school or university. It was exceptional. Now it's the red bar. What does it mean, the red bar? It means that 32 and 18 together, it's 50% of our deaf children in regular school are in regular secondary school at a level which prepares them for high school or university. Yeah? It's a huge change. We also see that the numbers who learn a profession in special school, it decreases from 70 to 10%. Yeah? But the group of deaf children with complex additional needs also increased a little bit to more of 20% now. So it's a huge change in educational setting of our deaf kids. More are mainstreamed and they learn much higher, they have more higher degrees. Interesting to see is also that those who are in this group, so those who are studying at the secondary level to go to high school and university, all these children in these two groups were integrated in mainstream before the age of 5. So it means that early integration is also very important to catch up with normal hearing children. So to conclude, I can say that neonatal hearing screening and early cochlear implantation have given a big shift, a big change in the educational setting of deaf children. We see more deaf children in mainstream education. We see more deaf children in higher school levels, reaching higher school level, higher professions, even more students now going to university. So if you count that all together, the investment at a very young age was really worth doing it, and it has saved a lot of money for the government on the long term, not on the short term. Thank you very much for your attention.